My name is Shimon. I'm a sophomore at UMass Lowell in the Introduction to Labor Studies class, and I'm here interviewing John Drinkwater, the Legislative Director at the Massachusetts AFL-CIO. My first question is, how did the AFL-CIO get started?
Well, the AFL-CIO was actually a national organization, a federation of labor unions. It actually started first with the AFL, which stands for the American Federation of Labor. It was a coalition of a number of craft unions that started in the late 1800s. Craft unions, which many of them are still around today, operate in the fields of construction, representing, plumbers, pipe fitters, iron workers, and those types of trades. Eventually, there was another federation of unions that formed, the CIO, standing for the Congress of Industrial Organizations, representing workers in industrial fields, manufacturing, textile manufacturing here in Lowell. So for a while, they existed separately through the early 1900s, and eventually in 1955, the AFL and the CIO merged and have been together as one national federation of labor unions ever since. And here in Massachusetts, we have a state federation of the AFL-CIO representing local unions throughout Massachusetts.
Great. Besides what you just included, can you give a brief overview of what the organization does?
Sure. Well, here in Massachusetts, the AFL-CIO is constituted of over 700 different local unions throughout the state, representing about 400,000 union members. And those members come from unions representing, industries, in the public sector, public safety, other types of municipal employees, state employees, unions in the building and construction trades, as I mentioned before, plumbers, pipe fitters, iron workers, sheet metal workers, and a lot of other private sector employment. Nurses are a highly unionized occupation, other types of medical workers in hospitals and utilities, and it goes on and on. We have, like I said, over 700 different locals spanning many occupations, and at the AFL-CIO we try to be the umbrella group representing the interests of not only each local union and their members, but also really all workers in the state. We really see ourselves as an organization made up of unions, but really representing all working people and trying to represent their interests and better standards for all working people throughout the state.
Mm-hmm. I understand the AFL-CIO is the biggest union in Massachusetts, right?
Yeah, so across the country, the AFL-CIO is the biggest labor organization. Obviously, they're made up of a lot of different unions, and nationwide representing between 11 and 12 million workers. Here in Massachusetts, we're also the largest labor organization, representing around 400,000. But we're really an organization of unions. So, while the local unions are structured, they're made up of individual members. We're in organizations that are structured, by local unions and their members.
Okay. And how long have you been with this organization?
I have been with this organization for about 10 years. I actually started working at the Mass AFL-CIO as a political and legislative intern while I was going to graduate school here at UMass Lowell, and have managed to work in a number of different roles at the organization, and now for the past about 3 years, I've been in the role of legislative director. So I work up the Statehouse, monitoring issues that impact unions and workers throughout the state, and try to advance legislation that raises standards for workers.
Mm-hmm. Can you walk us through an average day for you with the organization?
Sure. Well, on days where there's activity at the Statehouse, generally speaking, if the House of Representatives or the Senate is in session, I will be down at the Statehouse, monitoring any type of action on the floor in either branch of the legislature, kind of keeping up with that type of activity. What bills may be moving, and for bills that are filed to the floor, legislators will attach various amendments. So it takes a fair amount of work to just kind of follow the legislative activity that's happening in the state, and making sure you kind of know what types of issues are going to the floor. And on days where the legislature may not actually be taking action, I'll be down there trying to set up meetings with legislators, and bringing workers and other allied groups into the Statehouse, just to try to educate legislators about our issues, and try to move them along through the legislative process.
You spoke a little earlier about how you got involved with the organization, but what really sparked your interest in this field?
Well, I did grow up around unions. My dad happened to be a pipe fitter in local 537 in Boston, and my mom was a teacher in the city of Lawrence, and so both of them happened to be union members. And I can't say that unions and workers' issues were dinner table conversation every night in my house, but I did grow up with certainly a knowledge of unions and what they meant. I was always very aware of certain privileges I had in growing up in an economically secure household with health care, and I was kind of very aware that there were certain things I didn't have to worry about because both of my parents had secure jobs with good pay and good benefits because of their unions. And as I kind of went through high school and college and started paying attention to issues, and particularly the issue of economic inequality in the country, and something that was really growing and causing a lot of people to really be falling behind and struggling just to make ends meet. I kind of look back on my experience growing up and really realized that unions were a really important structure in this country to provide working people with that kind of economic stability, to be able to raise their families and not have to worry about where the next meal was going to come from, or how they're going to pay the bills at the end of the month. So I was a political science student here at the university, and knew I wanted to work in some kind of organization that tried to advance good public policy. And I would say my number one choice was to work in the union movement. So I cold called the state AFL-CIO, just kind of Google searched whether there was an AFL-CIO branch in Massachusetts, and found out there was, and just asked if they would be willing to take on an intern. And really, since then, I've been very lucky to have been able to give them the chance to come in and do a little bit of work for the organization. And 10 years later, I'm still there. So it's worked out pretty well.
So you say you started as an intern. How did you work from that internship to where you are now as legislative director?
Well, when I came in as an intern, it was 2006, and the AFL-CIO in Massachusetts was deeply involved in the governor's race. It was a year in which it was an open seat. Governor Romney had decided not to run again, and there was an opportunity to try to elect a new governor who would support working people. So when I came in, the AFL-CIO was going through their process of vetting candidates. Eventually, got behind Governor Patrick, and we worked really hard to campaign for and elect Governor Patrick to office. So I came in at a time, it was a very opportune time to kind of work hard and really get to know a lot of people within the organization who were working on the campaign, and really learn a lot, not just about the union movement, but about politics and campaigning as well. So it was a good time to kind of create relationships and show that you're willing to work hard and were dedicated. So definitely learned a lot at that time, and after the campaign, was able to learn a little bit about the legislative process with a new governor and a newly elected legislature at the time, and I really went into it having in college followed national politics quite a lot, and oddly enough not really knowing a whole lot about the state legislative process or the different issues, and so that internship and getting in with the organization and really learning how important from day to day the work of the state legislature is, and really the role of unions and the many different issues that unions try to advance, both to protect the interests of their own members and really promote the public good, was a really great learning experience, and definitely one I wanted to stick with.
Mm-hmm. Before we talk about the major issues you're working on right now, can you tell us the priorities of the organization?
Well, I think generally the AFL-CIO exists to be an umbrella organization that brings unions together into one organization, and one major goal of the organization is just to foster solidarity among unions. Every union has their own struggles, their own campaigns, and I think the value of having a unified labor movement in this country and in the state is that to bring unions together, recognizing that we're all in it together, and solidarity is an important thing. So if there's a union that does the thing that they the last resort, so to speak, and has to go on strike, that there are other unions to be out there with them and donating to their strike fund and helping them out in the cause. And I think that's really the primary reason for a coalition of labor unions to really just help one another out. And then of course we have a lot of different policy goals that we can really only advance by unions working together to push them. If every union just goes up to the Statehouse and pushes their own individual thing, it's really not that powerful. But if you have an umbrella organization representing, with 700 local unions behind it, that's a pretty powerful force to be able to, push issues at the Statehouse.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Okay. And then what are the major issues you're working on right now?
Well, we really feel like we have a long way to go in raising standards for working people. So one issue that we're working with a number of organizations on, religious organizations, community groups, and other unions, is raising the minimum wage in the state of Massachusetts. Right now, Massachusetts actually has the second highest statewide minimum wage in the country at $11 an hour. We had recently passed a minimum wage increase, and we had, at the beginning of this year, implemented the final phase-in at $11 an hour. So we're at a point now where we don't have any future raises, built into the law, and we feel it's important to keep up the progress that we made in getting to $11 an hour. Because while it's great to have the second highest in the country, if you're working on if you're working full time on the minimum wage in Massachusetts today, you're still making less than $23,000 a year, and in a high cost state, it's simply impossible to do that. So you have workers trying to piece together multiple low wage jobs and working up to 50 and 60 hours a week and still remaining in poverty. So there is a bill filed in the legislature this session to continue phasing in dollar increments to the minimum wage until it would reach $15 an hour in the year 2021, which would represent an actual living wage for most workers in the state, where, because we believe if you work full time for a living, you should be able to at least earn what is considered a living wage and be able to get by. So we've struggled in the past to even keep up just with the rise in inflation, where workers' wages have not even kept up with increased costs of living. So we feel it's really important to keep making progress on that issue. Another issue pertaining to wages is, it's really good to have a minimum wage that has the force of law. But unfortunately, there are a lot of employers out there who don't currently follow the law. And the issue of wage theft is a big problem in Massachusetts. It actually totals around $700 million a year that workers are either not paid or underpaid. You see this a lot with workers operating what's called the underground economy, paying workers in cash under the table, oftentimes below the legal minimum wage, or workers might be going onto jobs working 50 or 60 hours a week, not earning the time and a half wages that they're entitled to earn after 40 hours each week. So we have a big problem with economic inequality in the country, where the average worker is struggling just to keep up. Our wage laws are barely keeping up with the cost of inflation, and when workers are going to work and not even getting paid what they're entitled to by the law, whether it be the minimum wage, overtime, or not getting their time earned sick time benefits that they're entitled to under the law. We're never going to fix the problem of economic inequality, and it's just blatantly unfair to workers. So we're also working on legislation that would introduce tougher penalties on employers that are found guilty of wage theft violations, and it gives the Attorney General increased tools to enforce those laws. And if there's any need of an example of why this is needed, just a couple weeks ago, the Attorney General did, and the Federal Department of Labor cited a company in Lowell with $1.2 million in wage violations because they weren't paying their workers the guaranteed minimum wage or overtime. So for every example where a company is caught and forced to pay those back wages to their workers, there are many, many more cases where those companies are operating and not being pursued for those violations. So anything we can do to help workers get the wages they're rightfully owed, we're going to try to do.
Would you consider this time compared to the past, or looking forward into the present, a good time to be part of the union, or successful nowadays, or what do you think?
Absolutely. One problem is that right now, today, it's very difficult to organize a union, and we unfortunately in this country have seen a real decline in union density. Part of that reason is because certain blue-collar work has been either offshored or automated in recent years, and good-paying union jobs have just disappeared. Other problems are that employers have become increasingly sophisticated in avoiding unions, whether that's by intimidating workers who try to organize, or by essentially washing their hands of any responsibility for the employers, for the workers in their own facilities, by hiring temp companies or outsourcing work to different companies, and essentially just muddying the water so much in terms of who's actually responsible for employees in the workplace that it becomes almost impossible to organize a union without being able to invest hundreds of thousands of dollars in a legal campaign to prove who the worksite employer actually is. So in that sense, that would help to explain the declining union density. But we really feel that today, perhaps more than ever, workers actually do see the value of unions, of having a collective voice to be able to bargain with your employer. And a lot of polls actually show that well over half of workers in this country would like a union in their workplace. And it's quite telling that only around 11% of workers in this country are represented by a union. I think that definitely shows that our labor laws have to be vastly improved in order to give workers the chance to get that union that they want. But I really think that today, especially with the increasing problem of inequality in the country, and workers not feeling very secure in the work they have or satisfied with the wages they have, I really think their workers are seeing the value of bargaining collectively with their employer to try to improve those standards in their workplace. And if we can eventually, try to change those labor laws for the better and make it a little bit easier to organize workers into a union, I think we'll see a big jump in the number of workers that are represented.
And you mentioned the decline in union density as a whole. Do you consider one thing here specifically an obstacle for the state of Massachusetts, AFL-CIO?
I think really the hurdles to organizing is really the biggest hurdle to growth. I mean, we're relatively stable here in terms of the number of unions now, that number of workers now that are represented by unions. Particularly today, we're going through a little bit of a boom in construction, and we have strong union density in the construction industry. We have a public sector here in Massachusetts, whether it's the municipal level, police, fire, teachers, and other types of municipal workers that are represented by unions and are see the value in that. And we have a number of other sectors, healthcare here in the state, that a number of workers in the industry have unions. So we're relatively stable here. We do feel that we, like I said, will see a big jump in the number of unions that are represented. That there are a lot of low-wage workers, in retail, for example. We see a huge amount of dissatisfaction for workers who are working for multi-billion-dollar international corporations in a lot of cases, making at or just above the minimum wage. If they do have access to healthcare benefits through the job, they're paying high premiums, high copays and high deductibles. They're workers in these industries really aren't satisfied with the jobs, but just find it almost impossible to do anything about it, particularly when companies can throw hundreds of thousands of dollars easily at a campaign to defeat an organizing drive. So with that current atmosphere, it's hard to grow. It's hard to ask workers to take the risk of trying to form a union in their workplace and potentially losing the job that they have, and the only thing that is really keeping them afloat by taking the risk of organizing a union and risk losing that job over that. So it is a really difficult environment to grow and organize, and we unfortunately at the federal level there's no immediate chance of changing labor laws to make it make the process more fair towards workers who are attempting to organize a union. But we certainly plan to try to change that climate and elect people to office throughout the country who really are willing to take a stand on that and try to pass laws that will give workers more of a voice in the workplace.
And for those workers interested in getting involved, how exactly do they do that? How do they start to organize?
Well, certainly, I would encourage any worker to reach out to a union to find out how they might be able to help them in the workplace. A lot of times, workers they don't think it's possible. They're stuck in a job that they don't like with pay they're not satisfied with, and they know they can't get by, and they just don't know what the next step is. I talked a lot about how difficult it is to organize a union in this environment, but it is happening. There are unions being formed, and workers coming together to improve their work environment, and it is possible. So I would encourage any worker. I don't think there's any better way to improve the economic stability that you have than to try to raise your pay and get better benefits and get representation on the job through a union. So workers can reach out to the Massachusetts AFL-CIO. We have a website with all of our contact information on it, and we'd be happy to connect workers with a union that could help them in their workplace if they want to take the first step towards improving their job and improving their standards.
And then we discussed earlier your role in the organization. Can you speak briefly on the other roles?
Sure. So I talked a little bit about my role as the legislative director, and at the AFL-CIO we're constantly pushing issues at the Statehouse. We also like I mentioned, foster solidarity among unions and try to, get workers involved, in other, pro-worker campaigns. We're also very politically active. We recognize that, it's important to try to advance pro-worker legislation, to try to stop any type of legislation we see is hurting workers, and electing the right people into office is really important in that. So we have a political process where for candidates running for, office at the local level, city level, and also the state legislature, we talk to them, we try to educate them about worker issues, find out where they stand, and get involved in local elections and try to elect pro-worker candidates to office. So when we do go down to the Statehouse to try to, push legislation that we think, will raise standards for all workers, we have people there who understand it, who we know get the issues. So around election time, city, state, federal elections, the AFL-CIO gets involved. We go out, we knock on our own members' doors just to educate them about where candidates stand on issues that matter to them. We phone bank and, do mailings to our members. So we are, very politically involved organization around election time, and we think that certainly pays dividends when we try to advance those issues at the Statehouse.
Mm-hmm. The organization, as you've spoken about, seems very interested in the community and community-based. And I saw on the website that there is scholarship opportunities for students, I assume. Can you speak more on that?
Yeah, so the AFL-CIO runs a scholarship program. We've done it for many years and give out more than $1 million a year in scholarships to high school students. The program is really funded by individual local unions who fund scholarships, and we have a common labor history exam that's administered through the Massachusetts AFL-CIO. So students who are interested in taking the exam on labor history, and we have scholarships that are awarded based on the scores for that. So I can actually remember as a high school student taking the labor history exam, and I'll actually say that I think taking that exam, which taught about labor history in both the country and the state, is part of what actually got me interested in the labor movement itself. And I think I got a $500 scholarship out of it. So it's definitely worth, requesting an exam, taking it. I think you'll learn a lot through the experience and have the opportunity to earn a scholarship, because we really believe in education, really honestly, from pre-K all the way through higher education. That's part of what the labor movement stood for. The labor movement was involved in establishing some of the first public schools in the country, and really feels that the access to a quality education is really important to a quality life, and that's really what the labor movement stands for, is quality of life, and education is really important towards achieving that. So we're really proud of the scholarship program that we run, and we think it's an important way to show that we're giving back to the community.
Thank you for that. If you want to leave us with any contact information for either you personally or the organization, that'd be great.
Absolutely. Well, I would encourage anyone who wants more information on the Mass AFL-CIO to visit our website at massaflcio.org, and you can contact me directly at my email, which is j.drinkwater@massaflcio.org. And please check out our website. There's plenty of good information and resources on the union movement there.
Thank you.